Welcome to the Whose Body Is It podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Malvin. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a birth worker, life coach for sovereign women, hypnotist, and a former liberal feminist turned radical truth teller. On this podcast, I expose the forces at play attempting to control our minds and bodies, such as transgender ideology, porn, prostitution, and so much more. Together, we'll untangle patriarchal lies as you listen to jaw-dropping interviews with women from around the world. Warning, while listening to this podcast, you might find yourself triggered or perhaps notice where you've been biting your tongue on the issues that matter most to you. In my coaching, I help women stop getting triggered by every freaking thing, cultivate resilience, stop unwanted behaviors, and increase self-confidence. You can book your first session at whosebodyisit.com. And I want to just say that it's because of your endless support that I'm able to interview amazing women, get their stories out, and produce regular episodes for all of you. So with that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. And if you're just listening in, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and consider making a financial contribution via the link in the show notes. You can also visit my activist sticker shop. My pro-woman stickers have the power to intercept transhumanist programming. So be sure to take a photo of your stickers out in the wild and tag me on Instagram at Whose Body Is It. Without further ado, let's get into this week's story. Okay, so you've probably been to a Zoom party, but have you ever been to a Zoom ambush? This episode is a recording of an Instagram live that was recorded April 1st. And no, it is not an April Fool's joke, where I shared the tale of getting ambushed by two former friends on Zoom in July of 2020. And you might be wondering, what were the causes for this intervention? Well, there were issues so serious, so out of this world, you might not believe me. Showing my bare face in public, 1991 to the present, including but not limited to elevators, small corridors, bathrooms, stairwells, cafes, airports, and parks. Bike riding, touching poles and doorknobs, dating, supporting pregnant women, in person, yes, in person, during March to May of 2020 in the state of New York. Other offenses included stating that a woman is an adult human female and refusing to inject myself and my future children with liability-free potions. Other inexcusable offenses and how I responded to this intervention and the miracles that followed are all revealed in this episode. Hey everyone. So in this live, I'm going to be talking about my Zoom ambush. So I'm going to give y'all a couple minutes to trickle in. This will be a comically tragic live, not unlike my other lives, but it's been a while. Yay! So many new faces. Also, I just want to name how strange this whole Instagram thing is. I've had this account for about 6 years now, and it really is remarkable. And I mean strange in an endearing way. It really is remarkable how many of you I have gotten to know personally, whether that's through coaching, whether that's through meeting you out in the wild, through events, going to your births. I mean, it's pretty cool what this app has really meant for all of us coming together and being in solidarity with one another through this really dangerously misogynistic times. And this week, I've been feeling a lot of hope and a lot of excitement about
what we've been able to do, how much consciousness we have been able to raise just in this sphere. And then I'm simultaneously aware of what is being implemented as we speak. So our rights are not in threat, right? They have already been taken away. And I really want to make that clear, that this is not a potential threat that we're encountering. It is already happening. How's the connection for everyone else? I see a comment from London that I'm freezing up. How's it going for everyone else? Is it okay? Am I breaking up? Can you hear me? Hey, Susie. Okay. I'm going to trust that the connection's good until someone says otherwise. So, okay, a good amount of you are here. I'm going to get into it. Okay, great. Connection is good. So, let me start with this. I'm going to give you a bit of a taste of my prior relationship with the two women that ambushed me. And I'll start with, let's call her friend A. So friend A was one of the first friends who I spoke openly in person to her face about my fears and concerns about the safety and efficacy of injections. And that was probably in about 2018, 2019. And she was, totally put off and, clearly concerned, but it wasn't a friendship ender, And this is pre-COVID. So I had already started to test the waters with topics that were coming into my periphery and giving a bit of background on why I was even talking to her about this, or why this was an issue that was concerning to me. And that all came from my experience working with birthing women and seeing what was happening to their children after the injections, and this really taboo thing that we weren't allowed to talk about. So that was friend A. I had another experience with friend A about a year later, where I sat with her in person and I started to express my concerns about men competing in women's sports. Now this was, I think, maybe fall of 2019 or maybe spring of 2019. I can't remember. And she looked me dead in the eyes and she said, "I don't disagree with you, but I just don't care about sports." And that was a point where I felt so hopeless. Here is one of my most academically minded friends, one of the most educated, most accomplished friends. Yeah, some of you remember, I have told this part of the story before, so some of you remember this. And that was really upsetting. I mean, I really felt hopeless and heartbroken by that. And so that, with all that said, I want to give you a little background. So then there was friend B. Friend B, I had similarly expressed my concern about the safety and efficacy of injections, again, at about, 2018, 2019, to which she replied, "I have a lot of doctor friends and they say what you're saying is all bullshit." Okay, not surprised. A couple months later, friend B and I were at a bar and she got pretty tanked up. And she confronted me about my involvement teaching fertility awareness method. And she said to me, I remember it verbatim, she said to me, "You know that method that you teach, fundamentalist Christians do that too." And just looked at me and waited. "What do you have to say to that?" And I said, I'm fully aware of that. Actually, I'm grateful to the Catholic Church for doing the most scientific research on the efficacy and safety of natural family planning, also now called in the secular world fertility awareness method. And anyone who's studied fertility awareness method learns very quickly why we have this research. We have this research behind this method because of the Catholic Church. Now, I am not a Catholic. I am not teaching a religious method. And one of the main distinctions between fertility awareness method and what's called natural family planning is that with natural family planning, they don't necessarily, they don't teach about abortion, they don't teach withdrawal, they don't teach barrier methods. So, they recommend abstinence if you're not trying to get pregnant. So there are distinctions, and I made that really clear to her that, hey, I am teaching, the secular method of this practice. So that I think is important, because that was also a moment where I thought, wow, my whole life, I thought I lived in the most progressive city in the world. I grew up in New York City. I thought I had the most progressive friends. I thought, we were so open-minded, and then everyone else was, narrow-minded or closed-minded or intolerant. And here I am having two distinct conversations where one friend tells me she does not care about sports, and therefore it's really not for her to comment on whether men compete in women's sports or not. It just really wasn't her thing. And I looked at her, and in that conversation, I looked at her and I said, do I look like someone who likes sports? From the years of knowing me, do you think I am an avid sport player or watcher? No, it is absolutely the farthest thing from my upbringing, the culture that I was raised in, to love sports, men's sports, women's sports. But we are all here worried about this issue, not because we are necessarily obsessed with sports, but because we see the insanity of it, right? We want to protect women and girls. So that is the background. So I mentioned friend A, friend B. So let's fast forward to COVID times. So March of 2020, COVID hits. Now, anyone else who was in New York at that time or in LA, any of the hot spots knows that it was a pretty intense time. And most people, who weren't, essential workers went into full-on lockdown, not leaving their house for 2 weeks, having strict rules with their roommates, with their partners, having the pods, the whole thing. Now, I will admit that at the beginning, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I could smell that something was totally off, but there were times where I left my house where I had to talk myself into being normal. I had to say, Isabella, you are going to go on a bike ride today. You are going to be outside. You are going to go to your chiropractor. If there is a dangerous, contagious illness going around, could you think of a better time to go, maintain your health and well-being? So in that time, because I was committed to normalcy and because I was still attending births and supporting clients, I would ask my friends to hang out with me. And anyone else who did this naively found out pretty quickly that this was unacceptable. Now, I could see that they were afraid, and I really did try to be accommodating. I remember going into friend A's neighborhood and riding my bike to Brooklyn and being like, hey, I'm in a park. It's a beautiful day. Would you like to come meet me in the park? No. So 2 months later, I left New York City. And then, in July of 2020, so a couple months later, friend A had reached out to me and said, hey, okay, so we're getting into the ambush territory now. So friend A had reached out to me and said, hey, I saw that you left New York. Wow, would you like to catch up sometime? And we had gone back and forth a little bit, and she had been screenshotting some of the stuff I had been sharing and said, I remember at one point she said, hey, something that you shared kind of sounds like something Candace Owens would say. What do you think about that? she would kind of like put my content in front of me and say like, this is something that I saw said by someone on the far right. Explain yourself, or something like that. That would be the context. And I was moving at the time, and I remember we had just kind of delayed catching up. And so we had planned, we had said, like, we're going to catch up sometime, blah, blah. So then July rolls around. I can't remember if I think, yes, July, she initiated that kind of Zoom catch up. And about 2 days before we were planning to Zoom and catch up, she texts me and she says, hey, friend B, I casually mentioned to friend B that we were gonna catch up over Zoom. Do you mind if she joined us? And this is the friend B was the friend that I had asked to meet me in the park one day in Brooklyn when I was biking around, to which she replied, no, that's not okay, blah, blah, blah. Friend B is also the friend who said that she didn't care about sports, and therefore men playing women's sports was a non-issue to her. So 2 days before Zoom, she goes, so friend A goes, okay, can friend B join us? She mentioned she hadn't heard from you in a while and would love to see how you're doing. And I'm just like excited for like a chance to reconnect with these women who I've known since I was 14. Yeah, since high school. It's my first year of high school. These were high school friends. So, okay, it's gonna get good. We're getting to it. Okay, we're only 13 minutes in. I promise we're getting to the meat of it. So, I was subletting at the time. I'm living in a super warm climate. I'm laying in the sun all day. Like, my life has completely transformed just because I have daily sunshine. Okay, we're going from New York City, addiction to the hustle, subway life, schlepping bags all the time. Like, it's still a really tense time, in terms of like COVID shit. Again, this is summer of 2020, and they are still in New York. So we sign on to the call, and immediately I can see in their faces, and again, this is all my projection of my story, but I can see in their faces that there is a shock. Like, there is a confusion around my big smile, my tan skin, my environment. I am showing up to this call glowing from the inside out. I have just made this massive life shift. I've moved from the north to the south. It's summer. Things are just expanding. At that point in my life, I was just starting. Just 2 years ago is when I launched a virtual business. And everything was just kind of expanding. So I show up to the call. I'm like glowing from the inside out. I really, truly feel wonderful in every way. And they're just like, so, how are you? And I could see their disappointment in me not matching the story they had of me in their minds, right? And remember, the portrayal of anyone who denied, the safety and efficacy of injections, or who's questioning the trans agenda, the picture of us that is portrayed in the media is someone who is a conspiracy theorist. Like, I imagine someone in a cave, alone, or in a dark basement, talking to their internet friends, and, being socially awkward, and, all the negative things that are said about crazy anti-vaxxers or transphobes or TERFs, just that we're hateful and miserable, really, or that we are deluded and unscientific and brainwashed, right? So I could see on their faces that there was already, that there had been a plan in place. And by seeing me and seeing me express my joy and just glowing, was a direct confrontation from the picture they had of me in their mind. And so I caught them up, how you do in a Zoom catch up, right? You go around one by one and you share what's new, what's been going on for you. And then it's, you would just talk, right? So I share for about 20-ish minutes, giving him an update, just about everything going on. And I wasn't even talking about COVID stuff specifically. It was more like, hey, I wasn't happy in New York. I've moved. This is what my life has looked like since I got here. This is my routine. These are the people that I've met, blah, blah, blah. This is what I'm working on. This is how my business is going. And I hadn't started the podcast of the channel yet. So yeah, I'm just like updating them, going on. And then there's a pause. And at one point, I remember one of my friends, I think it was friend A. This is really sad because friend A and I were, we were like best buds, and we loved to shop and, like just love art and fashion together. And I remember her saying, I really like your leggings, like it was like a reluctant, like, you don't look miserable. And actually, I kind of like what you're doing. I like what you have going on, But then they were like, then she had to like go back into like, no, intervention mode. So, oh my gosh, the comments are so great. Okay, so then there's a long pause, and they kind of open with, well, we wanted to talk to you about the content that you've been sharing. And, that, we don't know if it's just that you haven't had anyone who's been affected by the virus or not. But, my friend's grandmother, she died of the virus last month. And I think I responded, wow, I'm really sorry to hear about your friend's grandma. She was like 89 or something. Okay, I'm really sorry to hear about your friend's grandma. Like one has nothing to do with the other. Anyway, so they were saying things like that. You must not have just been personally touched by what's happened. That must be the explanation for why you are sharing information about, germ theory versus terrain theory or whatever. So they kind of go down the laundry list of offenses. And it just went on for a while, and they were both crying. And friend A's was it friend A? Yeah. Now I'm forgetting who's friend A and friend B. Okay, one of the friends' mother is a pediatrician, and she is the one who I confronted a couple years ago. I mean, I talked to them both about my concerns about injections and stuff, and the friend with the mother who is a pediatrician, she confronted me in the Zoom call, and she said, do you think, she said, my mom is a pediatrician. She gives out injections to infants and kids all the time. Do you think she's, evil or bad? And I said, I think your mom is a foot soldier in the pharmaceutical industry. I said, I don't think your mom is malicious. I don't think your mom is a bad person. I think she is following the orders of her education on this topic. Do I think she is injecting poison into children? Yeah, to answer your question, yes, I do. So you can imagine that didn't go over so well. At one point, they said that they were concerned. So I had been living with my mom in New York for those 2 months of like peak COVID, March to May. My mom and I were living together, and they expressed, concern for my mom because of my mask-free lifestyle. And in the Zoom call, I did not even address that point because it felt so absurd to me. But after the call, I addressed it, and I think I sent them a message that said, hey, I know you mentioned concern about my mom's health and well-being. Well, I wanted to let you know she's on vacation right now in Colorado, and it's actually her 5th plane ride since March. And I sent them a photo of my mom just being like fabulous in Colorado, just like posing with like the backdrop. And then of course they were like, oh, we're so happy she's relaxing and having a good time. So but to go back to the kind of the intervention, what that transformed into was a processing call that I was holding for them. So I was holding a processing call for them, mourning the person that they used to know or that they think I should be. And that's what that call was. And the only reason I was able to be in that space of, call it above the line space, a space of presence, was because I was armed with the tools of conscious leadership that I learned through Emily Saldea and the Conscious Leadership Group. I had done years of NLP education, hypnosis education. And so as it was happening, I had this kind of, the coach in me came out, and I could just see kind of from above what was going on. And they were just crying. They were just crying a lot. And I said to them, I have already mourned our friendships. I understand that you are on totally different pages when it comes to these issues. I have already mourned the awkwardness and really tragic nature of our children not playing together because you think that my future kids carry some contagious disease. And then one of them said, yeah, you're right. I could never have my kids around your kids because they're not going to be injected. And there was just like tears and tears. And I was like, yeah, it's really sad. It is really sad. Yeah. So that call really was a turning point for me because that was really a really important practice for me to be confronted in a really heart-wrenching way by friends, and to hold my own, to stay in presence, to not blame them, to not shame them, to answer questions directly. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't feel anything, but I came away from that ambush with a little rage, obviously, that they had done this and they had tricked me, and they actually apologized after for having done it in this way. It was a very cowardly way. Had they said, hey, we want to set aside time to talk to you, of course I would have been willing and open. That's all I've wanted all along, is to have conversations directly with friends about, these issues. But as we know, with people on the left, there is this intolerance, right? If they can smell or they think that you have even an inkling of something that is not aligned with the dominant narrative, they get scared. I think it's a fear thing. Because as, I think a lot of you know, when you start to question one thing, whether that's injections, whether that's industrial birth, whether that's the trans stuff, it doesn't just exist in that vacuum, right? It has effects on your entire life. It might affect your relationships, your romantic relationships, friendships. So I can understand why they, even if they did agree with me on some level, would avoid it at all costs, because what that would mean would be to question everything. And what I did, and what I know a lot of you are going through now, does mean like risking everything. You risk your reputation, you risk lifelong friendships, you risk ideas that former clients had of you, your colleagues. You might even risk being employed in the future. Part of the reason why I can be here and talk so openly to all of you is because I have created my own business. I am self-employed. I am my own boss. No one can cancel me. No one can fire me. I make the rules. I am the creator of my own life. And this is why I'm showing up every day sharing this information, because I have created an infrastructure to be able to do that. And so I understand that not everyone can do that, or is willing to do that, or wants to do that, and that is fine. We don't all need to be doing it in the exact same way. But to go back to that conversation, that was, if you've ever practiced something, if you've ever tried to work on yourself, and then this was almost like a test. It really felt like a test for me. This ambush was an opportunity and a test to see, how can you hold it together? Can you have love for these women? Can you have compassion for these women? Can you be dignified in your reply to these women? And I did feel sadness because we left off. Yeah, the Zoom was totally for me. It was a total for me experience. Totally, Nikki. Yeah. And so we left off that call. They were really upset. They were crying. And I said to them on the call, like, this feels exactly what I just mentioned to all of you. Like, this has become a processing call. I feel like I am holding a processing call for you, mourning the person you think I should be or should have been. And so I said, I'm going to leave it to you two on how you want to move forward. And I made it clear at that point, I was totally down to move forward. I said, I would love to speak to both of you again. I am willing to move forward in a friendship with you. And so I am hurt that you did it in this format, and still I'm willing to move forward. But it doesn't seem like the two of you are. And so I'm going to leave it up to you, and you reach out, please, when you're ready to talk again. And I never heard from either of them ever again. Yeah. About 8 months later, I was in DC, the Women Picket DC event, after, the Equality Act was introduced. And I'd posted a photo of myself holding a sticker that says, "Trans women are men and most have a penis." And I'd posted that to Facebook, and about a couple hundred of my former high school classmates had seen it and were commenting on it, and it had been shared to at least one other person's page. I think this guy that I went to high school with had shared it to his page, and that's where all like the really bad comments were kind of concentrated. These comments were bad. They were like, if I ever saw her on the street, I would punch her in the face. Another friend who wasn't on the Zoom ambush call, but who was friends with those two women, had said something like, "She's been this way for years." I think I made an Instagram post about it, if you remember. It said something like, "She's been this way for years. She's made a career out of hating trans people. I've tried to call her in. I've tried to call her out. Nothing worked." When in fact, that woman who left that comment refused to meet with me in person. So that was a lie. She lied. She refused to meet with me in person. I begged her. I said, "Does our friendship mean so little to you that you would not even have a conversation about this with me in person?" So I bring up that Facebook kind of scandalous event because those two friends who were in the ambush were liking like those comments that were like, "This girl is trash. She's been this way for years. If I ever saw her on the street, I'd punch her in the face, blah, blah, blah." And so for me, that was a hard line. That had crossed the line. Yeah. So in some ways it made it easier to like release any hope of, reuniting. And I just want to say, we have no idea what's to come. Friendships that seem like they're totally over, where you feel the most betrayal, where you feel the most hurt, there is no knowing, what the future holds. So I don't want to sit here and pretend that I know that I will never talk to them again, or they will never reach out, or yada, yada. But I do know that I set, a personal boundary after, the participation in that comment thread to say, wow, like my doors have been open. I really have been willing to talk all of these issues through, but this is crossing a line, and I am unwilling to engage at this point. So again, that's for each of you to decide, And another thing that happened to me that may have happened to some of you, I imagine, which is that it was almost like a teasing relationship. Like, when you're, it's almost like an abusive new relationship dynamic where someone like says they like you, but they don't want to call you. And then they like will only say hi to you when no one's looking. And they're kind of leaning in and they're pulling back, and they're leaning in and they're pulling back. And I had another friend who did this where she would message me, hey, your content is like too intense, I'm unfollowing you. And she'd unfollow me. Then she'd refollow me. Then she'd unfollow me. Then she'd refollow me. Then she'd unfollow me, but she'd look at my stories. And she would do this back and forth. And my response was like, take care of yourself. Do whatever you need to do for you. It is middle school shit. And I was comfortable in that dynamic to be like, hey, if you want to look at my stories, great. I'm sharing a lot of information that I want people to see. If you don't want to look at my stories, don't. But after a while, it actually really started to upset me. It was, what would have felt better, I think, at that point was just for her to decide and say, like, rather than be like, hey, I'm kind of interested in learning more. Oh, wait, actually, that's really hateful. Like that back and forth. So, it's weird. And the only way I can interpret that is that they are trying to decide, how am I going to position myself in relation to this woman? Because as you all know, liking a post or even following me or other accounts that are, controversial, can really, cause a lot of controversy in relationships. And so I think at that point she was trying to protect herself and say, how am I going to relate to this woman? This is a friend. That was a friend that I had since I was 4. Yeah. So this is only a small sampling of the craziness that has ensued over the years. And I can truly say that all of this was for me. And I mentioned, in the kind of in the post leading up to this, that miracles did really follow that conversation. And one of the miracles, or one of the really for me moments or aha moments, was, I am okay. I can be confronted. I can be ambushed. I can be, barraged on Facebook comments. I am okay. I am better than okay. The worst has happened. The worst has happened. And I am okay. I am actually thriving. And what freedom it is to be able to go through something so heartbreaking and to come out the other side and say, wow, I am more resourced than I ever knew. I even surprised myself. How did I do that? So, yeah, as heartbreaking and kind of comically tragic as it was, I really actually, after that experience, I really sat with, what is the dominant emotion that I'm feeling after this ambush? And it was joy. Isn't that strange? It wasn't fear, it wasn't sadness, it wasn't anger, it wasn't creativity, it was joy. It was contentment. I felt proud of myself. And so that is what I wish for every woman navigating this time, these conversations with their friends, is at the end of the day, we can't control how what we share lands for them. That's their responsibility, right? All we can do is speak unarguably, speak clearly, feel that we've said what we need to say, and go from there. So it's a good story at the end of the day. It's not a sad story. It doesn't feel sad. And I want to also emphasize, the freedom that comes with doing something like that. That facing your worst fear, whatever your worst fear is. Oh yes, Nikki, I love that. Yeah, Emily Saldea said in our episode on the Free Birth Society podcast, she said, I was never as successful or made as much money as when I started telling the fucking truth. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. If you are not vitalized by what you're sharing and doing, How could you possibly expect that other people would be? It doesn't make any sense, right? There are few things that bring me more joy than arming women with the tools to speak unarguably, to speak the truth, to share their feelings with their loved ones, with their clients, whomever they're speaking to, whoever their audience is. There is nothing that gives me more satisfaction and joy in this world by helping all of you get to that point. I am here to help you fill in the pieces. And it takes practice. It takes practice. But when you get it, oh my God, it feels so good. You know? And I'm talking something as like fulfilling and satisfying. It can be small, like it's not small, but confronting an abusive uncle, or calling out something that your stepdad said that was misogynistic, or your brother, or maybe it's your sister who said something misogynistic. Starting to practice in these little ways. I'm not suggesting that everyone start a podcast and a YouTube channel and a blog, and sometimes the hardest thing is starting, with your personal life. I interviewed Kara Dansky a couple months ago for the second time, and I was shocked to hear that she rarely talks to her friends about transgender ideology. She has written a book on the topic, on the harms that this is doing to women and girls, and she was reluctant to talk about it at dinner parties. That blew my mind. So, starting off with your friends, starting off with family members, practicing using your voice, even writing down your thoughts. Maybe you're not a writer. Maybe you're going to do some, voice audio recording, whatever it is. It feels so good. It feels so good. Right? This stuff is hard. And we can do hard things. We can do it. Anyone who's had a baby knows that that's true. It can be really hard, and you can do it anyway. You're going to do it anyway. It's going to be okay. Any questions before we sign off, before we close? The turf glow. Thanks, Emily Bruce. So if you're hearing me speak and you're feeling like, damn, I wish I could say that, or I wish I could speak in this way, or I wish I had the guts to, confront my friend, this is what I'm here for. This is what I do in the Coaching for Sovereign Women. We're really pulling out those unconscious beliefs, talking about what's holding you back, what are the risks, and I will give you and teach you the strategies and the tools that have worked for me all these years. That's all I can do. And they work. And they work. Someone's asking, I'm so calm. Do you ever feel your body get anxious during these conversations? I used to. I absolutely did. My heart would beat really fast. I would have to go to the bathroom a couple times before, talking to a friend. But I don't so much anymore because, when I notice myself going into that place or wanting to go into that place, I have tools and strategies to bring myself back to presence. So it's not that I never go there, or I never get nervous, or I never get scared. It's that I notice when I'm going to that place, and I have the tools and strategies to shift out of that. So, and that's really the idea with all of, consciousness tools, which is that the idea is not that you will never feel scared. It's that the frequency and the duration in which you're in that place starts to go down because you notice it, right? This is all that awareness is. Finding the spots where you're kind of drifting and giving yourself the opportunity to come back into a state of presence. Sam, yeah, confrontation makes you physically ill. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this is for a number of reasons. I think, on a human level, fundamental level, it is scary to, be without the tribe, or to be isolated, and on the other hand, as women, we are socialized constantly, from birth to be a people, pleaser, to appease those around us, to always think of the collective comfort above our own, right? So someone asked some of the tools that I use. So I draw a lot from my background in studying Ericksonian hypnosis. I also studied neuro-linguistic programming. And then more recently, in the past 3 years, I started to learn the tools of conscious leadership. And Emily Saldea introduced me to those tools. And I've done a few trainings with the Conscious Leadership Group. And so each modality, kind of has similar principles, but they call them different things. You may have heard of parts therapy. That is from NLP. That's an NLP technique. In the context of the Conscious Leadership Group, they call it persona play. So there's a lot of overlap with the different modalities, but yeah, it comes down to, developing a kind of emotional literacy to notice what you're feeling, when you're feeling it, where you're feeling it, and developing the tools and strategies that work best for you. And so for some people, breathing is really important. For other people, expressing their feelings through movement or sound is the best way to kind of shift energy. I'm a big walker. I love to walk. One of my favorite ways to shift energy is to lay in the sun, to roast in the sun, and to walk. For some women, it's boxing. For some women, it is singing or dancing. Yes, a lot of nonviolent communication. There's so much overlap for sure. And also, with the Zoom ambush, I did do a lot of active listening. It was a lot of hearing what they said and repeating it back to them. I also did this as a kind of activist anti-COVID strategy or anti-mandate strategy, where I would go restaurant to restaurant and repeat back the instructions that they were relaying to me. So a hostess would say, so you have to wear a mask because you don't have a vaccine card. You have to wear a mask from the hostess booth to the bar, and then the bar to the table when you're outside. But when you sit down at your table, you don't have to wear one. And so I would repeat that verbatim back to her, and I'd say, so what I hear you saying is that I'm going to have to put a mask on from point A to point B, and then when I'm sitting down, I don't have to wear it, but when I stand up, I do. Did I get that right? She was like, yeah. And so that's a great strategy in all confrontation and all conversations, whether it's about trans, whether it's about vaccines, whatever it is. Because what that is you being in a state of presence. All that is you being in a state of presence. Listening. Okay. I'm going to sign off now. Thank you everyone for joining. This is a really a fun live. And anyone who's curious about the posters, so this one up here is by Max Dashu. She runs a site called suppressedwomenshistories.com or maybe .org. Max Dashu. So for anyone who's interested in getting a poster like that, you can get it at Max Dashu's website. And I got this one on Etsy, but I don't remember the shop. Sorry. Yes, I will be doing more lives and really excited to release new episodes. I will be back on schedule next week. And yeah, just so excited to see all of you, and thank you for showing up today. Lots of love to everyone. Have a great weekend.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support my work, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To stay in the loop for my latest coaching programs, hypnosis sessions, free resource guides, and more, follow me on Instagram at whosebodyisit and visit my website, whosebodyisit.com.